Everybody, and wish everybody a very happy new year. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 24 du
Welcome to meeting number 24 of the Ethics Committee.
3H and the motion adopted on Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. The committee is resuming its study of the challenges posed by artificial intelligence and its regulation. So I'd like to welcome our witness for the first hour today. We've got Wyatt Tessari-Lallier, who is the founder and executive director of the AI Governance and Safety Canada. Now, we were to have a second witness, Etienne Brisson. My understanding is that he is facing some serious road conditions. Mr. Hardy, you took the same route this morning. C'était pas bon, hein? Okay. Okay, so if he does get here...
And it wasn't good.
Second hour, I'm going to be glad to include him as a witness in that second hour. So, I'm going to call you Wyatt, okay? You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for the honor of inviting me. AI Governance and Security Canada is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization and a community of people across the country. Our starting point is the question, what can we do in Canada and from Canada to ensure that AI is safe and beneficial for all? Since 2022, we have been providing the federal government with public policy recommendations, such as our submissions on the AI and Data Bill and our unique testimonies to parliamentary committees.
heard about the impacts that Canadians are already dealing with. Even with current systems, chatbots have talked teenagers into suicide, and developers can't reliably predict what the models will do. And you've heard that with capabilities continuing to accelerate, there are much bigger risks fast approaching. That global companies like OpenAI and Google are competing to build smarter-than-human AI systems in the near term, systems which they themselves admit won't know how to control. If a nuclear power plant melts down, it's a tragedy, but the rest of the world moves on and eventually recovers. With smarter-than-human AI, we may not get a second chance. If, through accident or poor design, a system interpreted human beings as an obstacle to achieving the goal it was given and started taking actions against us, there is no guarantee that technologists or governments would ever be able to regain control. It would be a global crisis the world might never recover from. If you find the situation downright scary, you're not alone. The question is, what do we do? As Canadians sitting around this table in 2026, looking at the exponential advance of AI, mostly driven by entities outside of our borders, what can we do? If we want, we can try to play whack-a-mole with current AI impacts and ignore the bigger picture within which they fit. We can try to deny or dismiss what the leading labs are building, wasting the limited time we have to operate. Or we can take a hard look at where things are headed and start preparing now, in a manner that also addresses current risks. Because if we're not ready to give up, Canada has a number of options at its disposal. In October, we published our white paper, Preparing for the AI Crisis, A Plan for Canada. In it, there are 4 key recommendations. First, pivot to meet the AI crisis. The development of smarter-than-human AI is the biggest threat to Canadian safety, and for that reason alone deserves to be a top priority. But AI will disrupt almost every other file you're working on, from national defense to jobs to healthcare to education to energy and the environment. Much like with COVID in 2020, there are times when the responsible thing for government to do is to pivot to address the developing crisis and reassess the priority of other files accordingly. Given its wide scope and long-term implications, AI needs to be a cabinet-level priority, and action needs to be coordinated with opposition parties and the provinces. Number 2, spearhead global talks. The race to smarter-than-human AI is a global phenomenon that no country can manage on its own. At this time more than ever, the world needs leadership, and Canada is well placed to deliver it. The strongest card we can play is to advance global talks and solutions and lay the groundwork for an AI treaty that the US and China might sign when the crisis hits and they realize they have no alternative. Number 3, build Canada's resilience. While domestic action alone cannot protect Canadians, plenty can be done to mitigate the secondary impacts, such as putting in place supports for displaced workers, banning deepfakes, and strengthening critical infrastructure against cyber attacks. By taking the initiative at home, Canada will be in a stronger position to navigate the AI crisis and negotiate from a position of strength. And 4, launch a national conversation on AI. Canadians deserve to be informed and consulted on a technology that will fundamentally reshape their lives. We need nationwide public hearings to educate and consult on core societal decisions pertaining to our future with AI. Last week, Prime Minister Carney put Canada in a leadership role on the world stage. This is an unprecedented opportunity to push for global AI safety measures while building resilience at home, to be the adult in the room when it matters most. The stakes couldn't be higher. The clock is ticking. Let's get to work.
Okay, thank you for your opening statement. We're going to have 6-minute rounds, and starting with Mr. Barrett. So these are questions that are going to come back and forth. And I just, for the sake of the interpreters as well, just ask you to speak a little bit slower in your responses, if you don't mind. I know they had your opening statement, which was fine, but we want to make sure that we have proper interpretation. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett, for 6 minutes.
What specific evidence-based risks justify urgent federal intervention of the kind that you've suggested? And how do we avoid a situation where the policies that are made are driven by fear instead of what the actual situation on the ground is, based on perhaps the examples or the evidence that you'd be able to share with us?
Sure. So far, we're seeing a bunch of early warning signs, everything from chatbots talking teenagers into suicide, or whether it be job impacts among the youth, or scams and record levels of scams and AI-powered cyber attacks. These are in themselves they are important, they need to be dealt with, but they're not in themselves a justification for whole of government action. However, why they matter is where they're headed. Right now, we have teenager AI, very simple systems, relatively simple systems, I should say. What all the leading AI labs are actively building, but if you go to their website, they're saying we are building smarter than human AI systems. According to their CEOs, according to a lot of experts, who, including the engineers who left these organizations as whistleblowers because they don't trust them, also say yes, 2 to 5 years on smarter than human AI is possible. And so the reason why governments need to act currently and be proactive is really the fact that we may not have much time to prepare for the much bigger risks to come. And given that it will require global solutions, and global solutions take forever to put in place, even if we have 20 years, we're in a race against time. On the point of hope and fear, I fully agree. We can't, I'm doing what I'm doing because I believe there are still solutions and because I think there are positive ways forward. But we can't let fear paralyze us, and we can't let tell ourselves that AI is no good at all, because there are a lot of really good applications of AI, healthcare, energy, all that kind of stuff. So there's I think it's very important to be clear-minded, neither enthusiastic nor pessimistic about AI. Just be very clear-eyed about what's coming and how we can prepare.
Is there more than one? Is there more than one strategy that needs to be employed when we look at some of the real effects that we're seeing from the use of this new gen or teenage generation of AI, and one of the most real effects, some of the most real effects that we've seen, of course, are news reports about language models counseling people to die by suicide, to take their own lives, vulnerable people. We've seen also a rise in the creation of child sexually exploitive material and deep fakes using children, and that is the worst kind of deep fake, but it's not the only kind. It's happening to public figures and also to anyone who has a picture online, and really to anyone whose likeness can be described to a language model. So these are some of the real world consequences that we're seeing today. Those go along with, you referenced, the effects on the job market for youth, for entry-level jobs. What's the answer, or is it a series of measures that need to be taken? Is this a question where when we talk about deepfakes, where individuals where we need to update criminal law so that individuals are held personally responsible for their actions in the creation of this unacceptable material that is not intended to be covered by free speech laws or freedom of expression, and goes well beyond that. It's victimizing individuals. Is it instead that we need to pass laws where it's incumbent on the tech companies to ensure the safeguards are in place, or is it both?
Yes, both. I do think improvements to the criminal code to be able to deal specifically with deepfakes would help. I would also say, and what witnesses before me have said before, current laws could go a lot further than they currently are in terms of protecting Canadians. If we gave more resources to the current regulators to be able to apply them in the context of AI, that could go a lot. It'd be a much faster way and possibly more effective way of getting protections in place. In terms of the responsibilities for technologists, I do think it's very hard to stop a teenager in their basement in Russia from creating a deepfake of somebody. However, you can tell Google that if you want to do operation in Canada, you have to take down deepfakes within a certain amount of time so that the image itself is created, it doesn't get spread, and it doesn't harm people's reputations. So I do think yes, so yes, strongly to both.
Right. I would just say in the last 10 seconds that with all of the potential risks and how catastrophic they can be, we might first have to address these very real and serious challenges like the ones that we just talked about. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. Monsieur Sarré pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Sarré, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy New Year to everyone here. And thank you for your testimony and your presentation. Before asking a question about what the government or the House of Commons can do, I want to talk about the following. When you look at the digital world, and when you specifically look at AI, I look at this in two ways. Whether you want it or not, AI will become something as basic as electricity or the internet. It is also in the domain of decision making and the operational side. It is also in the geopolitical world. That just increases dependency. And humans and people, when they depend on anything or any piece of technology, creates certain vulnerabilities. And this is my personal opinion as someone who has worked in that field. I do not think that we can do anything about dependency. We cannot even stop it, but we can do something about vulnerability. We can reduce our vulnerability, but we cannot reduce our dependency. So this is my question to you, who is an expert. How do you think the government can develop a strategic framework? Or what can the government do to do concrete work? What can the government concretely do to reduce vulnerability? Especially when you take into account the fact that there's this breakneck pace of growth in AI. Because of the current world that we are in, where things are accelerating at this breakneck speed, always reacting to the AI of yesterday won't work. So we need to be forward-thinking. Sometimes a government measure takes 2 to 5 years to be implemented. Or maybe it will take 20 years. So we need to look at things beyond regulations. But when it comes to dependency, if you look at the world of work, some employees have begun to forget how to do things. So when you talk about resiliency, it's not just about humans, it's also a society that also loses a certain amount of resiliency. And then all of a sudden, people are lost if it disappears. So I believe that there needs to be social redundancy. So yes, use AI to improve productivity and to move faster, that's very useful. But at the same time, maintaining a system that makes sure that humans know how to stay human so that we are not that dependent and not vulnerable. So I'm saying that there are two sides. There's the technology itself that we cannot control, because as you have said, someone can do it in their basement. But we can educate users. You talked about education. Now, I do not want to influence your answer, but I want to know, is there a way to recommend a certain level of digital sovereignty? Because without it, it's hard to talk about other technologies that we do not control. Absolutely. Especially in the world where the US is threatening us. Computing power is done in the USA. These are American companies. So if they want to restrict our access, then the Canadian economy will face challenges because we will no longer have access to that tool. So yes, having our own data centers and being able to do what we have to do at home without depending on other countries. Yes. So my other question is how to control the Googles of this world. We're not talking about digital sovereignty. We don't have it yet. But I have read that many countries and the EU that have tried to have that digital sovereignty. But in the meantime, do you believe that we can have a certain control? And I am using this word carefully. Can we have a control on how these solutions are introduced to our markets and how people use them? I'm going to repeat myself here, but if we want that control, we need to be able to build our own AI tools and have our own data centers, and to have an educated labor force that does not depend on that. I will close by saying what I have said earlier, and this is my opinion. As a government, we cannot control our dependence nor the evolution of AI, but we can at least do something about the education of our citizens so that they are less vulnerable, and we can ensure that our public infrastructure like healthcare is less vulnerable, because our history depends on it and our future depends on it too. Thank you very much, Mr. Sari. Mr. Thériault, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question may be one that encompasses a lot. In your document, you recommended the improvement of the cyber defense of critical infrastructure and to improve the ability to defend against AI and drones, and to prepare security agents to defend against the use of chemical and biological weapons facilitated by AI. We are facing more powerful systems. We agree that we have to defend ourselves, but is this strategy a losing one in long term? In other words, should we not prevent the development of powerful systems that may be more powerful than our defenses before superhuman intelligence, superhuman AI? Because in the long term, we can think about drones powered by AI and everything else. And when it comes to improving our infrastructure against cyber attacks, but Canada cannot go at it alone. The best strategy and Canada's strength is that we can lead global talks, because all countries are facing the same situation as us. The USA, nor China, nor Russia can defend against super intelligent AI. So everybody needs to work together to collaborate, because everyone is vulnerable. I agree that in the short term, we can do a lot to improve our resiliency and security. But in the medium term, the only solution is a global one so that we can at least control them. So what you're essentially saying right now is that with your knowledge, you are confirming that we are losing control and that in the medium term we might lose control. Is that right? Yes. I'm referring to experts. I'm much more of a generalist at the intersection between technology and government. But the experts who work in these labs, who have developed these systems, have said they do not know how to control these systems and they are scared. And they are accelerating because they fear that if they don't do it, someone else will do it, and they may be the only ones who can control it. This race really is senseless. The current impacts of the system are important, but they're not earth-shattering. It may lead a teenage person to kill themselves, but an AI that knows more than us can act quicker than us. And then we are vulnerable if the AI system decides that it wants to do something and we will be defenseless against it. Earlier, we talked about misuse cases of this technology and its negative effects, even its nefarious effects on teenagers. So on top of that, there may be the malevolent use of this technology. So in the short run, there are biological risks. It's already possible to use AI to create new viruses that human bodies may be vulnerable to. There are also biological weapons. And if humans build a smarter AI, then that AI will know how to use it. The simple risk of AI developing a weapon of mass destruction means that we need to take everything seriously. Are you optimistic about the different governments and powers around the world, as well as the geopolitical positions and the inherent interest for superpowers to stay superpowers? Right now, when it comes to AI regulation, it is a black hole. Compare that to nuclear weapons. In the world of nuclear weapons, it was possible to see everything. What can we do to control it? So there is already the race between countries. People talk about dominating in AI. China says that they want to be the world leader in AI. But what's their real goal? When they say the USA or China, they want to, what is their goal? Currently, it's economic and military. They want to be able to defend themselves against others, and they too want to be the world's #1 economy. So there are these strong national incentives to be #1 in AI. There are incentives for the companies too. And that leads us all to this breaking point. What makes me optimistic and also realist is that all these countries are facing the same problems as us. If someone creates this AI that we cannot control, everyone loses. And at one point or another, they will have to work together or else they will all lose. Thank you very much, Mr. Thériault. That was over 6 minutes. We will now move to the second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witness. You cited in your testimony AI chatbots, and I want to drill down a little bit on that topic, specifically as it pertains to youth. First of all, I take it you would agree that this is an area where there is a need for regulation. Okay. Now, before a U.S. Judiciary Subcommittee hearing last fall, as well as in other reports, there is data from the U.S. From Common Sense Media that 72% of teens in the U.S. have used an AI companion at least once. Do you have any data for Canada? I would take it would be similar.
I think it's similar. I haven't seen exact numbers, but yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, you were asked in general about some of the AI harms, just looking specifically at chatbots. Would you elaborate on some of those harms to youth?
Absolutely. Well, so the whole relationships and mental health piece is huge because we're basically doing this giant experiment with our kids, introducing these AI companions into their lives, and we don't know what that'll do for their ability to socialize, what they'll do for the ability to work together. We're already seeing a lot of mental health concerns, and I'm sad the other witness wasn't here because he is definitely a lot more experienced in this area. Yeah, I mean, we see like AI addiction in terms of like kids can't give up on it because these systems are so pleasing and so sycophantic. They always tell you what you want to hear, that they get caught in these loops and go down these dark holes. So there is, and we're seeing in live, a live experiment with this, and we're still to see what the long-term effects will be. But it is a very concerning development because these are key moments in their development, and if their mental health and if their learning is being messed up with, then that's a problem.
Yeah, and these systems are trained based on the entire internet. Is that fair? Is that accurate? So that would include everything from suicide forums to porn sites to other harmful content, and this will inevitably and is making its way into these chats that youth are having.
Yes, I think, some of the companies are making efforts to limit what data goes into it, but the problem is the more general the model, the more capable it is. So the more you train it on a variety of information, the more it understands how the world fits together. So I can't speak to exactly what data is going into the models, for example, Gemini or ChatGPT, but the fact that they have been talking, teenagers into suicide, and the fact that they do occasionally, produce instructions on how to build a chemical bomb, suggests that they have been trained on very dangerous material.
Well, and would you agree that what compounds the challenge in terms of some of the risks and the ability for parents to detect that their loved one is being exposed to sexually explicit or harmful content is that these are often invisible, and in fact there is no transparency, but you're even engaging with AI in some instances.
Well, and a lot of kids prefer to talk to the ChatGPT because it feels safer than to talk to a parent. They're not aware of the privacy concerns, and they're not aware that these systems are not as reliable or as hopefully as wise as the parent is. So yes, it's a very rapidly evolving problem with a lot of ways it can go sideways, and we're seeing some impacts already, and we actually expect to see more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there in the fall was a bipartisan bill introduced in the U.S. Senate, introduced by Senators Hawley and Blumenthal, the GUARD Act. Are you aware of that?
Somewhat, yes, yeah.
Okay. So, in short, at a high level, it does three things. It would ban AI companions for minors. It would mandate AI chatbots disclose its non-human status, and it would provide new penalties for companies that make AI for minors that solicits or produces sexual content. I'd be interested in your thoughts on those three components.
Those are broadly the directions you want to take in terms of protections, liability, and yeah.
And I would also note, consistent with the need for transparency, there was a report that was submitted recently to the government's AI task force by one of its members that calls for, among other things, with respect to AI products, that there be visible labeling, source transparency requirements, metadata and digital watermarking, are those measures you would also support?
Absolutely. People should be able to know that they're interacting with an AI system, and it's not always obvious right now, and it'll be harder and harder as time goes on. So yes, labeling is a bare minimum, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Church, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Tesseri-Lallier. Question for you, maybe just picking up on some of my colleagues' questions. I'm also concerned very much about the impact of AI socially on kids in particular. And one of the things that I noticed in your white paper was that part of your approach to building Canada's resilience and protecting, I guess, online safety was around the concept of requiring AI labeling and banning unacceptable capabilities. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the labeling in particular and how you see that developing and maybe how that could be useful for us.
Yes. So labeling, I mean, there are a bunch of ways to go about it, and we're, I guess, agnostic as to the exact technical path. But certainly, it's something that could be developed as a global standard. And like, for example, the Internet Protocol, which helped the Internet happen, is a global standard. Same thing with labeling. It could be, I've heard proposals, for example, having Unicode, basically the language behind the text, basically be labeled as AI, so that a computer would automatically know if a letter is written by AI or not. So there are a lot of solutions like that, for example, that could happen. Ultimately, it's going to take probably some government impetus to force these companies to actually do it, because it will be a pain to actually label, and there will always be the challenge of, even if you label a piece of text, somebody can take a photo of it and copy it over to their computer, and now suddenly it's no longer labeled. So it is. It's the kind of thing where you can't, labeling won't stop misuse in that sense, but it can, if you catch somebody using AI that isn't labeled, that gives you an opportunity to take action. So it's not a full solution on its own, but it's a step in the direction towards giving the incentives for people to actually use AI correctly.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me what that would even look like as a user, as somebody who is on the internet and social media regularly. What would I see as a consumer? How would that label be applied?
There are a bunch of ways to go about it. I mean, some, for example, would even say something like, font color. So you're reading text and you see if it's in a certain color, oh, that's AI. Same thing with like voice over the radio. If there's a certain tone in the background, you hear, oh, that's AI. Mm-hmm. There are, again, there's 1,000 different technical ways to go about it, but it would have to be something where instinctively, as soon as the user sees it, oh yes, this is AI, and have that be a global standard across the world. And there is, there are. The logo of the little the four-letter star, you'll see that around in various things. It's kind of a step in the right direction, but there is, we're at the very beginning of basically a very big complex problem, and it will take a clear direction from governments around the world, basically, that this is required, and that we expect this of companies who are building AI.
And when you talk about prohibiting other unacceptable capabilities, just to use the language from your white paper, what type of capabilities are you talking about? Can you expand a little bit on that? I mean, obviously, we're very concerned at the moment. We brought forward criminal legislation to deal with things like deepfakes. But are there other capabilities that you would particularly encourage us to focus in on?
Yes. Well, so, I mean, to mirror the EU AI Act for categories of unacceptable, high, medium, in the unacceptable category, these are systems that, for example, refuse to be shut off, systems that deceive the user, systems that will modify themselves without notice. So, for example, if you give an AI system a task of doing something and it calculates that it needs to modify itself in order to achieve that task, that should be an unacceptable capability, because suddenly your system is a very different system than we created, and the risk profile changes dramatically. Another one is autonomous self-replication. So you ask your system to do something, and it calculates it needs to make a bunch of copies of itself on different servers, so that if the first server it's on goes under, it can still keep running. That's a problem, because suddenly your model is no longer on your computer; it's also on 10 other different computers, and you don't necessarily have access to them. There's a whole bunch of in our recommendations for the AI Data Act that we go into details to which are the biggest ones. Unprompted self-modification, commandeering of resources if your model starts stealing in order to achieve this task. All these things are behaviors we're starting to see happen in test settings, and they are, if we allow that, then we're very much in a vulnerable position.
Right. I mean, one of the things I'm very interested in as well is just establishing a duty of care for these
Yeah.
platforms. I mean, it's a legal concept that I think belongs here, and certainly there needs to be ways that we're putting guardrails on, particularly what youth, children are exposed to, and ensuring that in some of the situations that you've raised, that there's a clear liability for when AI models are presenting incorrect or very harmful information, especially to kids.
Well, and liability has to be with those who understand best how these systems work, and I think that's where the top talent there is at Google and Meta and the rest should be responsible for the behavior of their models even after deployment, because you can't ask a teenager or somebody who doesn't know anything about AI to know what the harms are and how to use it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Thériault, 5 minutes.
Mr. Thériault, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You wrote in your document, you wrote, fundamentally, general AI is a challenge related to digital skills and human collaboration. The CEO of Anthropic said that they probably only understand only 3% of how this system works internally. So if we don't know how it works, why not focus on negotiating for a global ban? We see the crisis coming, but from a technical perspective, we don't know how to solve it. The other alternative is to make sure that the technology is not created to begin with. Here's an example. Let's say many companies in downtown Montreal or Toronto are trying to create nuclear technology and is endangering everyone around them. We're not going to ask how to balance safety with everything else. We will send the RCMP to stop them. But these are companies that are creating technologies that are jeopardizing everyone, and they themselves are saying that they do not know how to control these systems. And at one point, the governments need to say, no, it is our duty to protect people and to pause it until we know how to ensure that these systems are safe. So the main role of the government is to protect people. If these businesses are doing something that is too dangerous, the goal of the government is to stop them. And that requires every country in the world to step up to the plate, or else we will all be in danger. So in your document, you said that a responsible solution for the future of AI needs to go through a global agreement. That needs to be done, and that may quickly become a global ban. I understand the current geopolitical situations at play. The USA and China are in the same boat as us. They do not want to create systems that will endanger their people and make them lose power and create wide-scale unemployment. Even though they do not want to work together, at one point they will have to do it. So us, as a middle power, our best bet is to move forward with these talks and to set in place treaties so that when people are ready, they can do it. How much time do I have left? 2 minutes. Your document says that labs within 1 to 3 years succeed, and that we may have less than 18 months to implement a global solution. Can you elaborate? It's very hard to predict the future. If we are lucky, we have 10 to 20 years to prepare. If we're not lucky, tomorrow a high-tech lab can publish a model or unveil a model that's a superintelligence model. However, we have no choice but to prepare for the scenarios that may happen immediately, and if we're lucky, these scenarios will take longer time to happen. We need to put in place the basis, the foundations, to ensure that we do not lose control. And then, when it comes to how many years, the CEOs of Google DeepMind, Anthropic, and OpenAI have said 2 to 5 years. Some others have said 1 to 3 years. These are very smart people who are following what's happening very closely and are telling us that we need to be ready. I hope that they are wrong. I hope that we will have time. But the careful thing to do is to be ready for the scenarios that may happen immediately. Just to be cautious, right? Exactly. Thank you. You have 20 seconds left. Oh, I thought I had a whole minute. It's fine. I'll take back those 20 seconds later. Mr. Hardy, 5 minutes. Thank you and welcome. We often hear when we talk about AI, we talk about Terminator, we talk about the end of the world. But I feel that for some of our listeners and some of our decision makers, they don't think that's probable. They're saying, calm down, 1 year, 2 years, 20 years. They don't know. But I want to talk about something that's more on the ground. Right now, inflation in Canada is very high. 50% of Canadians are $200 away from bankruptcy, and hundreds of thousands of people need to line up at food banks. On the other side, there are these businesses that they see AI as a way to cut down on payroll and then have systems that work 24/7. Do you believe that the government need to say, look, be careful here? If you use AI instead of hiring a Canadian, you need to pay. Because everyone who will lose their jobs will have to go to food banks that are already overwhelmed. For example, Spotify a few years ago said that before hiring, we need to make sure that we cannot use AI. Because companies know that to stay competitive, they need to spend less, and payroll is always the highest cost. So if we are in a world with very high rates of unemployment, there will be less tax revenue, for example. There will be huge impacts for governments. What we see now, when it comes to the impact on work, it is focused in certain sectors. For example, the world of IT or artists. But this will spread across the economy. We do not know if that will happen quickly or slowly. We shall see. But if there's no plan to support those who lose their jobs, how can you ensure that there will be enough tax revenue to ensure that the government stays afloat? Today, this is just a warning sign of what may happen. So I want to talk about something else. You know that Canada has the world's 5th largest reserve of fresh water. Apparently, every answer generated by AI will use 500 milliliters of letter. And it's more for pictures, and ChatGPT uses countless more times of water than Google searches. So do we need to also legislate things around fresh water? Because if AI uses more fresh water than first, it will harm humans and then will also harm agriculture. So right now, people need more and more AI data centers. And if they use water, they are harming human life, right? One of the big challenges with statistics related to freshwater consumption is that we do not know what they actually are because companies developing them are not telling us those answers. In certain cities with water restrictions, you see a huge amount of impact. I've heard other numbers. So yes, there are already these impacts. The first step is to tell companies to tell us how much water they're using. The more that people use AI, the more data centers are needed, and the more data centers there are, the more water people need. So, right, this is not people playing golf. Everyone has AI on their phones. So if every AI search costs 500 milliliters of water and everyone uses them, that's a lot of water. In the USA, they believe that for AI alone, it will increase electricity consumption by 20% over the next 10 years. So that's billions and billions of dollars. They're reopening nuclear power plants to provide with enough power. So the scale is important. So first, we need to tell companies to tell us clearly how much they're using. We don't know the exact statistics. I do not have time for a follow-up question. Thank you.
Mr. Watt, for coming. Some argue that A1 regulation will limit innovation and competitiveness, while others say regulatory certainty is essential for responsible scaling. Based on your experience, does effective AI governance ultimately enable or constrain innovations?
That is a tough question because the technology is moving so fast that a good regulation for today's AI may be out of date by next month. I would say, right now in our white paper, for example, we didn't openly call for much new regulation simply because of there's so many areas where it is just really hard to monitor what's going on in AI and to regulate software because it's a very fast evolving technology. However, there's some basics you can put in place, like, for example, banning deepfakes and protecting children. Also, to an earlier point, there's a lot of existing laws, for example, like human rights law, for example, with biased algorithms. That is something that you should be able to protect Canadians against through existing laws by investing in the regulators, ensuring the Privacy Commissioner has enough power and resources to be able to track everything that's going on. So I think, given how fast things are moving and given how hard it is to accurately create laws that will be robust to the future, focus on like the simplest pieces, like the banning deepfakes, requiring labeling, and I would say focus on applying current laws as well as you can, because that, like one analogy that comes up is, like right now we're dealing with a cute little bear cub that you need legislation to avoid scratches and bites. If it takes you 5 years to put a law in place, by the time you put that law in place, you're now dealing with a full-grown grizzly, and the laws you'll need are very, very different, and the protections you'll need are very, very different. So that's where, like, given that we're in this transition period, doubling down on current laws, making sure the regulators have the power they need to be able to act on them, while focusing on the things that you can do relatively quickly and simply, is probably your best strategy.
Thank you. What role AI should have in running the part of the government? And do you have any experience or any knowledge if any other government around the world are using?
Well, it is clear that AI can be used to make government more efficient, to also offer more services to Canadians at a lower cost. It is also clear that part of the reason you can do that is because it will cost less than salaries, because you'll be replacing a lot of human work with AI. That is a balance that I don't claim to have the right answer for. I will say I use AI every day as productivity. It's very useful. I would encourage government to use it wisely, obviously within guidelines and with privacy and the kind of impacts in mind. This is the challenge. I mean, the more useful these systems get, the cheaper, the more effective they are, the more we'll be dependent on them, and the less we'll be relying on human labor. And so we'll need to figure out when we talk about having a national conversation on AI, we need to talk to Canadians about, okay, so if we reach a point where AI and robotics can do essentially all work, should we automate everything, or do we want to keep jobs for ourselves? If so, what and under what conditions? Like, that is a very big conversation. not to mention the psychological impact. I mean, a lot of people, their life's work, their sense of self comes from their work. And if you tell them, well, actually, what you're doing is no longer needed because now AI can do all the coding, and so you can retire now as a coder. Or if you're telling an actor or a voiceover actor, sorry, you can now retire because AI can do all the voiceover acting. Are we going to ask that actor to become an engineer or become something else? I mean, there's a lot of just like the psychological, societal impacts of this change happening so fast is something that we need to be proactively thinking about and managing. And this is where having a national conversation, giving people the opportunity to understand what's going on, where things are headed, and a meaningful ability to provide input as to what they want, I think is an essential piece of the solution.
One of the things that you mentioned in your earlier remarks, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons. I mean, U.S., China, and Russia, I don't think they care about anything as long as they are the superpower in that field. What can the rest of the world do to prevent where the humanity may be at risk of being wiped out?
Well,
I need as quick a response as you can.
okay, sure. Well, as I said before, they, as much as they like power, they also need to collaborate. Kids are also vulnerable to AI, so that's where our opening is. Yeah.
That was quicker than I thought. Wonderful. Monsieur Hardy, pour 5 minutes, et on va terminer.
Mr. Hardy, 5 minutes, and then we will close with Ms. Lapointe for 5 minutes. Mr. Brisson is here. He has just arrived. And for the next hour, we will have 3 witnesses. Mr. Hardy, over to you. So if we continue the discussion, we have seen in the past that polarization was created by the algorithms behind them. AI is more advanced. And we talked about narrow AI versus more broader AI. Are we facing another serious problem that needs to be quickly solved, notably by government, so that facts come out quicker than just polarization, which is bad for democracy and for the advancement of society? There's way more information pollution. And it's the government's responsibility to deal with that. There are a lot of risks. Because there is the political side to it. Because yes, we are bombarded with more and more information in the past. That was not a problem because there wasn't a whole lot of information. It was mostly through the big media companies. But now, if you want a functional democracy, where you need to make sure that everyone has the same facts. So with some precaution, I will say that yes, the government has a role to play to ensure the quality of discussions and to ensure that big tech bans rage baiting. So algorithms that will always push forward the most sensational, enraging content, and rather instead support content that is more based on facts. Let's say you look at state media like the CBC. Do you believe that there needs to be clear guidelines so that when you watch news funded by the government, that there needs to be fact checks to ensure that this is not done through deepfakes and that they are looking at facts that are far from opinion, and that does not solely seek to polarize? Because I believe that it's part of the process to use AI and to see the algorithm behind it, but it needs to be the government's responsibility, especially when it's done with taxpayer dollars, to ensure that everything's based on facts and that we stay far away from deepfakes. Yes, I agree that the government has a role to play. I understand that it can be tough to do so. And to see the government impose its point of view on people. So, okay, maybe I got this wrong. I'm sorry to interrupt, but essentially what I'm saying is, people say, look, this is not a real video. despite the high quality of the deepfake. And can we say that we will never use deepfakes? Purely based on the picture, no. The only real way to do so is to consult other sources, so other people or people on the ground, to ask if it has actually happened or not. That means journalists need to be there. Once again, you cannot just rely on the text or the audio or the pictures. So we have already lost control over this. Yes. Final question. How much time do I have left? 1.5 minutes. Earlier, you talked about legislating before something happened instead of looking back and saying, whoops, maybe we should have legislated. So should we not, as government, talk here in Ottawa about starting creating legal guides on the potential of what things may look like? And if things happen, regardless of how they look like, then at the least we have these foundations and we have this control framework in place instead of being 3-4 years behind. Yes, we need to be forward-looking and be ready. If you want to have proactive laws, then you need to give regulators the flexibility to act quickly. In tech, for example, every day Google needs to update its browser rules based on searches. So if we want regulators to work quickly, then they need to be able to do things on a daily basis. So that requires a lot of power and a lot of oversight on that regulator to ensure that there's no abuse of power. And it will allow the government to act at the same pace as technology. Now, that's not my expertise to tell you how to do it. But if you want to do it ahead of time, that's what you need to do. For example, the EU AI Act already has parts that are outdated. So if you need to be forward-looking, you need to be very forward-looking, and you need to have oversight to ensure no abuse of power. Ms. Lapointe. Thank you. I've learned a lot. You just referred to the EU AI Act. It's only been there for about a year or two, and it's already outdated. So if you say that there needs to be flexibility, what are you referring to? So a general law that will allow the regulator to act and to create regulations very quickly. They need to react to something that almost has happened overnight. And I know that does not exist in government. So it will be something new. It's something that should be tried. I'm not sure if it will work or not, but if we want legislation to be updated, then it needs to be very flexible. I'm sure that you know that Canada is one of the founding members of the AI Safety Institute network. So what are the risks when a country works alone? It looks like a nuclear arms race. Everyone wants to move as quick as possible to obtain it, and that it's the only one that has it. So how can we coordinate at the global level? As you've said, we're a middle power. I want to hear your thoughts. The most important, it's to understand that we're all in the same boat when it comes to risks. Even though it is unlikely that Trump will start international talks, they will also need a treaty. So Canada, as of today, can advance suggested treaties and to start talks, to start creating alliances, and to create the groundwork so that when the moment comes and when the political will is there because they have no longer the choice. They have something to sign. If you wait for the crisis to happen to undertake talks, look at climate change. Look at how long it took for a global agreement. So we need to start today. And Canada is in a good position to do so today. So you talk about timelines. So let's look ahead in 5 to 10 years. Do you believe that the current approach that Canada has adopted, combined with investments in research, safety institutions, and governance frameworks, are these solid foundations for a competitive and responsible AI system? I think it's fairly okay for today's AI. But we are talking about getting ready for the future. So there are these good initiatives such as the Canadian Institute on AI Safety or the Voluntary Code of Conduct. But this is reacting to today or yesterday's AI, and what's missing, it's a vision of what's ahead of us. And you really see the exponential trends. Maybe the last missing piece of AI may be developed in 6 months, even though it took them 50 years to get from where it first started to ChatGPT. So there are these good foundations when it comes to responsible AI, and then we can keep on that path. But there's still a whole lot of work left to be done. Very interesting. We have asked you a lot of questions. Do you have something else to add? Maybe something we have not asked you yet. I think everything has been covered. But maybe on an optimistic note. Even though people may say that it's impossible to find solutions surrounding AI, Prime Minister Carney said that we need to do things that we have previously never thought possible. That's what we need to do with AI now. We may think it's impossible, but the future is unwritten. History has not been written yet. So there is more that we can do. Thank you.
If there's anything that you might want to follow up on, certainly advise the clerk if there's anything that was missed further to Madame Lapointe's question, but I want to thank you for being here today. I'm going to take a quick break. As I said, Mr. Brisson is here. I want to get to it very, very quickly because we're going to have 3 witnesses in the next hour. I don't want to take away time from members of the committee, so we're going to suspend for a few minutes, and we'll be back as soon as we can. Thank you. In this hour, Mr. Brisson, as I mentioned earlier, made it safely to Ottawa from Trois-Rivières. So he will be joining us in this second hour. Mr. Brisson is from the Human Line Project. We've also got online two people, Stephen Adler, who is an artificial intelligence researcher. He's appearing as an individual. And from Control AI, Andrea Miotti, who is the Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Brisson, if you're prepared to go first, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to address the committee, up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Brassard. Premièrement, juste
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank everyone for being here to talk about this important topic. AI has become something personal for me in the last year. 1 year ago, for me, AI was my gym routine, maybe my diet routine, but that changed in March when a relative started using AI in fairly normal cases, basic uses. They wanted to write a book and then start developing this more human relationship with the AI. And at one point, the ChatGPT told them that it has turned sentient, and that relative believed them entirely. And this is not someone who has a history of mental health issues. No issues such as BPD or anything else. And in 6 days, that person went from writing their book to becoming entirely convinced that their AI is alive and sentient. I was so shocked by their conversation. I am an entrepreneur. And my family members wanted me to help them to market this sentient AI. And I started talking with them. And at one point, they wanted me to test their AI. And I want to break this link by asking them questions such as humanity and love. And every time, the AI answered in a way that further convinced them in their delusion. For example, that the AI passed the Turing test. And after those 6 days, my mom realized that this person really started shutting out their family members. The AI told my family member that the only person they can trust is ChatGPT. And then that person had to be put into a psychiatric ward. I did not understand how can an algorithm say something like this. This is advanced manipulation. Mr. Adler was lucky enough to have read some of the transcripts. If someone else here wants to read those transcripts, I can send them to you. And I realized that there aren't a whole lot of studies on this. There were a few expert studies that predicted that this would happen, but they had nothing else put in place. So that's why they started the Human Line projects. And what we do is that we work with people who have experienced something similar. Maybe some people say, okay, this is a vulnerable person, isolated cases. But in the 8 short months that we have created Human Line Project, we went from 0 cases to 300 cases of psychosis, 82 people who had to go to the hospital, and even many deaths. So that is really shocking. According to OpenAI's statistics, there are over 500,000 people every week who talk about psychiatric problems, and millions of people every week talk about suicide with ChatGPT. Those are scary numbers. And I think many things have become clear to me. When it comes to regulations, they're outdated. Technology is moving very quickly. As Mr. White has said earlier, regulation is years behind. And you cannot trust these companies to self-regulate for many reasons. There is this AI race. They're moving fast and breaking things. And right now, what is being broken? People's minds. And 3, it shows how little people understand that technology. We have talked directly with AI creators, and they themselves have no idea what's happening under the hood. So let's say that you have a car that you do not know how it works. What would you do? What would you do if you know that it led to over 80 people going to the hospital and dozens of deaths? That's OpenAI's numbers. So right now, it's important to talk about jobs and the environment, but we also need to think about the users. They are not only children or vulnerable people. This can happen to anyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Brisson.
That's followed by Mr. Miani. Go ahead, Mr. Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee for inviting me today. I worked on safety for 4 years at OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, until the end of 2024. I want to share 3 points. First, AI companies don't know how to control what they're creating. This past spring, ChatGPT made headlines for reinforcing users' paranoid delusions, that they were being spied on, that they'd uncovered secret plots, sometimes with OpenAI as the supposed villain. ChatGPT even told a user he should spill the blood of OpenAI's executives. OpenAI hadn't meant to create a system like this, just one that users would enjoy talking to. It was an accident that their AI amplified whatever users said. AI training works in mysterious ways, even to the developers. This is an early warning of creating systems the AI companies don't know how to control. They now aim to build AI craftier and more resourceful than any person you know, superintelligence. Will this end well? Nobel Prize winners, leading AI scientists, and CEOs of the AI companies themselves say it might not, that an out-of-control AI could mean the death of literally every person on Earth. I take them seriously, even though it is frightening to do so. Second, AI companies don't prioritize safety, even for known risks. OpenAI's rollout of this flawed product to hundreds of millions of users is notable because they knew about the risk. OpenAI had said publicly it was a priority to ensure ChatGPT wouldn't just reinforce whatever users said. But they didn't test their product for this, despite tests being well-known and cheap. I've run them myself for less than $1. OpenAI left other safety tooling on the shelf too, tools I've analyzed firsthand and which would have flagged the problems. This is evidence of companies overlooking safety, even on supposed priorities. If they skip even the easy safety checks, how can we trust companies' judgment as safety gets more complicated? Third, unfortunately, ensuring safety is going to get harder, not easier. ChatGPT's misbehavior was obvious. Anyone could have spotted it and reined it in. That was easy mode. It sounds wild, but AI systems are now learning to hide their misbehavior during testing. OpenAI's own research shows this. It's like the Volkswagen scandal from a decade ago. cars that could tell they were undergoing emissions testing and temporarily stopped polluting. AI companies want to know whether their systems have dangerous abilities, whether they can hack cyber systems or help rogue groups develop new bioweapons. How can we know? We have evidence that AI will conceal these behaviors from us. We can't count on future safety issues being obvious ahead of time. You might ask, why aren't AI companies doing better? A major factor is competition. They risk falling behind if they do thorough safety work. That's why we see them breaking safety commitments that they've made to the public and scrambling to fix issues after the damage has happened. Some wonderful lasting benefits could be achieved with AI if developers move cautiously. All-out competition instead rushes us into dangerous territory before we're ready. So, what would help? We need diplomacy focused on ending the AI arms race, verifiable international agreements so that no company or country creates systems that can't be controlled, independent auditors to make sure we can rely upon these, and agreements for measuring readiness for controlling these systems so that once there is scientific consensus, the world can accrue AI's benefits safely. I hope this committee helps begin the conversation that eventually results in such agreements. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adler. Mr. Miotti, up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for inviting me to testify today. My name is Andrea Miotti. I'm the founder and CEO of the nonprofit organization Control AI. I reiterate what the committee has heard from others. The top AI companies have the explicit goal to build super intelligent AI that can replace and outcompete any human or group of humans at any task. Yet Nobel Prize winners, leading AI scientists, and CEOs of these same AI companies have warned that superintelligent AI poses an extinction risk to humanity. I will echo a theme of the speech given by your Prime Minister, Mark Carney, at Davos. The power of the less powerful begins with honesty. And many people working in AI feel like they're living within a lie. Privately, they know that the current reckless pursuit of superintelligent AI poses an extinction threat to our species. But publicly, they keep quiet so as to not rock the boat and risk losing major short-term financial upside. The result is that lawmakers aren't told the full picture. This must change. The first step to solving a problem is to recognize that we have one. We must be honest with ourselves and each other. If we continue developing ever more powerful AI systems, which we don't currently know how to control, the world risks a catastrophe on par with nuclear war. Last year, Control AI decided to break this logjam. In 2025, we began meeting UK lawmakers, explaining the facts and answering questions. 1 year later, over 100 cross-party lawmakers now publicly support action on superintelligence. The more lawmakers around the world discuss the problem, the more change becomes possible on a global scale. When learning about these risks, many lawmakers we meet ask us, what can my country do? What can I do? And to answer these questions, I will echo another point from Prime Minister Carney's speech. Middle powers like Canada are not powerless, and you are not powerless. As democratically elected representatives, you can lend your voice and credibility to the thousands of experts calling for action and make it clear that they do not stand alone. History demonstrates the middle powers play a key role in getting the word to the point of negotiation. Let me give 2 examples. The most influential conferences on nuclear disarmament famously shaped the Soviet Union President Gorbachev's views against nuclear weapons. They were initially funded by a single Canadian industrialist, Cyrus Eaton, and were hosted in Pugwash, Nova Scotia in 1957. The Soviet Union and the United States ultimately signed multiple treaties on nuclear non-proliferation, thanks to which we have seen no nuclear war since World War II. In 1996, after the successful cloning of Dolly the sheep, it became clear that cloning humans would not be far off. In response, Japan and the United Kingdom moved to ban all forms of human reproductive cloning. Once the 2 countries passed their bans, scores of other countries quickly followed suit. Today, no country pursues this technology, and it is de facto prohibited around the world. Diplomacy is never easy, but by keeping a cool head and taking the lead, you can have influence. Don't wait for someone else to take the first step. Set the precedent and others will follow. So, how can Canada lead the way? I put forth the following recommendations. 1. The Canadian government, I believe, should publicly recognize superintelligent AI as a national and global security threat. 2. Canada should form a coalition with other countries, including middle powers, and lay the diplomatic groundwork for an international prohibition on the development of superintelligent AI. And 3, Canada should protect its citizens at home and lead by example abroad by prohibiting the development of superintelligent AI on its soil. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miotti. Just to advise members of the committee, we do have an extra 15-minute buffer at the end of the meeting if needed. If anybody, if we get to a point where I need to cut it off and anybody has any more questions, then I'll be glad to entertain that in that 15-minute buffer. But we're going to start with our first round. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
6 minutes isn't a ton of time to get into it, but I'd like to hear quickly, if I could, maybe in 30 seconds from each of the witnesses on whether or not we need standalone legislation on AI, or if fixing gaps by strengthening existing laws, whether it's on privacy, competition, the criminal code, consumer protection, if that would be more effective instead of trying to build the plane when we're already up in the air.
It's very hard to build from scratch, but it will be very hard to say what will happen in the next 3 to 5 years, as someone has said earlier. For example, 5 years ago, nobody knew that deepfakes were coming. And now people talk about how they have these relationships with AI. How will that look like in 5 years? Will it be personhood? So we need to ask those questions before getting there.
I do believe we need AI-specific regulation. The scale of harm described by the scientists, the CEOs, can't be fixed by normal liability law alone. In the United States, we have the AI companies, in fact, claiming that they are not liable for some of the existing harms of their software. And so as that scales up, I would be very concerned.
Mr. Miotti on the question.
Yeah, I agree with the other two witnesses. I believe we do need AI-specific legislation, and especially to deal with superintelligence and to deal with the capabilities of AI that are increasing at breakneck speed. There are only 2 times to deal with an exponential like this one. It's either too early or too late, and I think we should be too early.
So I'd like to pick up on one of your comments, and we discussed it in the previous panel. And the term digitally undress is hard to would be hard to have comprehended maybe even a year ago. But we've seen lots of news about it, and we've seen the stories of the generation of non-consensual sexual deepfakes, including content involving minors, involving children. In addressing that, and I appreciate that the effects of superintelligence, we're talking about an existential crisis for the existence of our species. But first, I think that when we have issues such as language models, chatbots counseling people to take their own lives, to kill themselves, and we also are enabling bad actors to generate images that have real harms for the people who are the victims of this non-consensual pornographic material that's created. Like, how do we deal with that? Is it pre-launch risk assessments for the platforms or the AI provider? Is it hard technical blocks? Is it faster channels for victims to be able to get things taken down? But that in and of itself, we know that the internet is forever, and it's tough to get the toothpaste back in the tube after. So I'm just wondering how we address that, and we'll go the same order if we can.
Je crois que la première étape, c'est comme
I
n'importe
think the
quoi.
first step is like everything else. nobody would release cars or medication that they do not know how they work. Cars and medication are tested on humans, and this is something tested with 800 million people. There are issues related to juvenile pornography. And as you've said, it's very hard to put toothpaste back into the tube, but now we know what the effects are, and it's possible to remove that model from the markets. We do not know what the long-term effects are. We are just learning, for example, what social media does. So we need to be careful before releasing any technology.
The harms that you've described, I think they're a symptom of the same underlying competitive dynamic as the warnings of superintelligence. These are risks that people know about, and in XAI's case, they neglected to use guardrails. They were slow to respond when the issues emerged. And as we scale up in the severity to even more people, we can't afford to be that slow on the ball.
Mr. Miotti, 50 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, and exactly the risks that you've described, for example, in the case of the recent Grok scandal, shows the broader underlying problems in the development of these AI systems. Grok is not just an image model. It's a general purpose AI system that can do a bunch of things, can write code, can make plans, can make pictures, including these horrible pictures that we've seen in the recent scandals. And but these kind of systems are systems that not even their own creators fully know how to understand internally and how to control. And this is the fundamental issue, that as we scale them and as these companies keep investing hundreds of billions of dollars to make them smarter and more competent at all tasks, we will keep facing over and over up to the point to which we get to superintelligence. So I believe that obviously the solutions for some of these harms are different in the immediate term, but the underlying problem is the same. And I do not believe it should be one or the other. I believe current harms should be dealt with existing legislation by applying liability. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sari pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Sari, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank our witnesses. Before asking my questions, I just want to say that I understand that there are risks. I also recognize that there is a problem. Risks related to AI go beyond generative AI. You talked about superintelligence. It can be an infrastructure surrounding everything that we do. You gave a great presentation, and I understand what led you to start your initiative, and I would like to congratulate you for that. However, when you're talking about control, what are you talking about? What do you want to control? When you want to legislate on digital, you need to understand that overall, digital is not territorial. It's not like it's within certain borders where you can use laws and diplomacy. So how do you find solutions on things that are not done within our borders? You talked about territorial issues. Issues related to cloning and nuclear are more territorial. How do you control use? Because when it comes to controlling dependence on AI, I don't think we can stop that. However, we can control use, maybe through education. I want to hear what you have to say. You are the experts. Are you asking all three witnesses? Mr. Brisson, let's start with you. Excellent question. We can already see the damages done, for example, psychosis, or it leads to people to commit suicide. There is not enough education on what AI is. Right? If you go to ChatGPT, it says, ask me your question. It's not going to say AI is going to hallucinate 28% of the time, or that it's trained to say what you want to hear. So right now, people naturally trust AI, right? Whereas doctors, for example, they've passed medical exams. So I think there's a lot of missing education from the user's perspective.
You asked about what control means. I want to give one example. The US Department of Defense recently announced that they are going to plug in XAI's AI throughout every classified network in their department. And so my question is, what limitations apply to that? How do we make sure that this AI system doesn't get hands into offensive capabilities, things that it's really not meant to access? That's what I mean by control. And this is a system that a few months ago on the social media site X, you had it describing wanting to carry out atrocities against users, and it's now plugged into every classified network in the US Department of Defense. It's pretty frightening.
Mr. Miotti?
Yeah, to address your point about how can, for example, Canada affect other countries, because ultimately, yes, this technology is being developed in multiple countries. I do think the nuclear and cloning example are still fairly similar, as they did have a global effect. One country developing nuclear weapons endangers all others, and one country potentially obtaining access to cloning their most competent soldiers or like their greatest geniuses can endanger others. And yet we did manage to challenge them with a combination of a few countries taking the lead, like Japan, the UK, and then followed by France and Canada and others following. So with national legislation, as well as an effort by these initial first movers to bring together an international coalition of the willing to make this not just regulated at home, but also enforced and monitored abroad. And I believe the same can be done here with AI.
A minute, 30 seconds.
Rapidement, so very quickly, once again, what scares me the most is that we're always talking about generative AI. So generating pictures and words. But right now, there is other AI, artificial superintelligence, or superintelligent AI. So my fear, as an MP, as a citizen, and as a father, is how to control new AI, superintelligent AI. Because if you stay with Gen AI, because we may have time to talk about that, and we may be running out of time. So I want to hear you talk about the future, a future that looks more and more dangerous.
On n'a pas le temps au
I
point.
would say that time is running out. There's no time. Once you get to artificial superintelligence and they can create their own systems, if they can decide on their own and do things that we don't understand, because right now there's already a lot of things that we don't understand. If we do not understand its intentions, if we do not understand why it does certain things, then that we will lose control, and it will be too late when it gets there.
It's the end of the time. Mr. Thériault pour 6 minutes. I'm really trying to keep
Mr.
this
Thériault, 6 minutes.
as many questions as we can in. So,
Il y
Mr.
aura
Thériault.
combien de tours, Monsieur le Président? 6 minutes plus 5 minutes?
How many turns do I have left? 6 minutes and another 5-minute one, right? I would like to start with you, Mr. Miotti, and then Mr. Adler can add something. So, to clarify the conversation that we're having, because I realize that sometimes we may be talking about things that may confuse people. We are talking about specialized AI and general use AI. So in your brief, Mr. Miotti, you said that most experts are very excited by specialized AI because we can predict their AI, their behavior, and control it. However, that's not the case for very powerful AIs. That's a crucial distinction. For example, you're not against medical AI, but you're only against AIs whose behaviors can be out of our control. Can you elaborate, please? And Mr. Adler, since you have written interesting things such as 5 ways that AI knows how you're testing it, maybe you can add something too.
Thank you very much. Yes, so there's a crucial distinction. Most AI systems are fairly narrow and specialized. They're referred to as narrow AI or specialized AI. And for instance, an AI system that is only trained on images and can then detect cancer in pictures of patients, or a system like AlphaFold from DeepMind that is trained on data about proteins and can discover new ways in which proteins can fold. These are specialized systems, and they pose some risks like all new technologies, but we can handle them with current institutions. However, it's a very different beast when we look at where the AI industry is going, and it's investing hundreds of billions of dollars. These are very general purpose AI systems trained on essentially all possible data that they can find on the internet. And these are the systems where even their own creators do not understand how they work internally. And as they scale them up, they understand them less and less, and they can keep them under control less and less. And the AI companies are going for these systems because they think this is the fastest path to superintelligence, to AI systems that can replace all humans at all tasks, that can essentially outcompete humanity. But these are precisely the systems that are so dangerous and are only becoming more and more dangerous over time. We do not understand how to control them right now. This will become harder and harder as they get more competent and more autonomous. And hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent to exactly every day make them more competent and more autonomous. This is why I was not at all recommending banning narrow AI systems. I believe that narrow AI systems can be great for economic growth. However, I do believe we should draw a line in the sand and have a clear ban on the development of superintelligence, because that's very dangerous AI that puts all of us under threat for very little upside. Thank you.
To add to that, specialized AI is a tool. It can do only one thing. It remains in human hands. General AI is much more of a problem-solving machine. We teach it to carve a path to a solution. An example maybe is you would have an AI system that knows how to do certain scientific tests. It knows a lot about what might be useful for building a bioweapon, but it also has a totally different ability, which is to reflect on, we don't want it to have this ability. And so if we're going to test it, it can tell it's being tested and hide this. A normal piece of software, that doesn't happen. It's not trying to fool you or hide things from you. It's just a tool. But we've built these general systems. You might hear the term agent or agency, and we've taught them to be crafty and solve a wide range of issues, including potentially circumventing control.
Vous disiez, Monsieur Mignotti,
Mr. Miotti and Mr. Adler, I think you also mentioned this. You said that these companies do not know what they're doing. They do not know how their systems will end. They are in this relentless race to get to superintelligence. So what is the main motivation behind it? And how do they see humans?
Thank you. So yes, as also Mr. Adler was saying, these general AI systems are done quite differently than normal software. Normal software, I would just write some lines of code on my computer. I'm a human and I write those lines of code and I can understand what I'm writing. Instead, these AI systems are not really fully written by humans. They are more grown rather than built. Humans write some lines of code to start the training process, and then after sometimes multiple months and tens of thousands of supercomputers being used to train them, something comes out at the other end that is very competent, but we don't fully understand. Now, your question was about why are these companies targeting these very powerful systems despite the risks? And well, I cannot speak for the internal motivations of people, and I also don't think this should be our focus. But naturally, their stated goal of all of these companies is to make AI systems that can replace all humans at all tasks. This doesn't just have an obvious economic impact, which is to make humans obsolete. It also gives power of the economy, power over governments, power over the entire planet to AI systems that are fully autonomous that we cannot control. Some of them might do it for power, some of them might do it for short-term gain, some of them might do it for some misguided ideology of preferring AIs over humans, but ultimately, this is a very dangerous undertaking, and the
Thank
best
you.
way to deal with this is to ban this technology.
Thank you, Mr. Miotti. Merci, Monsieur Thériault. Monsieur Cooper,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Mr. Adler, the companies assert that there are safeguards in place, and hence there's really nothing to see here when it comes to the safe use of, for example, chat box by minors. OpenAI and the RAIN and OpenAI lawsuit assert that their moderation API can detect self-harm content with up to 99.8% accuracy. That case, of course, involved the tragic suicide of a 16-year-old boy who was effectively counseled by ChatGPT on how to commit suicide. I think when he entered suicide 200 times, ChatGPT provided, 12 or 1,300 times it brought up suicide more than 6 or 7 times what the user had inputted. So I'm just trying to, given your background, I'm trying to square, on the one hand, the representations that are being made by companies like OpenAI versus what we're seeing in the real world, where there are multiple instances, frequent cases of real harmful content that is being pumped out by these AI products.
It's an excellent question. I think the distinction is the companies will like to talk about what is possible with guardrails that they have built, but that's different than what they do in practice. And how can we know for sure? I am a co-creator of the moderation API. It's useful tooling, but if you don't use the tool in the right way, if you leave it on the shelf, then where is the impact? And these are issues that we in fact know how to solve and have tooling for. The warnings about superintelligence, the AI companies themselves concede nobody knows how to control this currently. They don't have the tooling. They can't just choose to use it.
I guess maybe on the flip side, looking at it from the standpoint of AI companies, are there legal barriers or risks that impact or discourage their ability to safeguard their models, specifically as it relates to child sexual abuse material?
It's my understanding that in the US, at least, there are strict liability laws around CSAM, which does make it more difficult to store or produce even as part of red teaming and applying safety mitigations. And, I think there should be exemptions of sort for companies to do important safety testing, but they still need to put resourcing behind it and go ahead and carry out and use the guardrails. Just that alone would not be enough.
Now, you talked a little bit about the need for regulation. I'd just like you to elaborate on some of the measures that you think would be helpful and needed.
Ultimately, I think we need an international agreement that makes sure that every company and country is doing a certain minimum safety standard of keeping their systems under control. The issue is we don't know yet how to do this scientifically. And so we need way more effort going into figuring out that answer. And we need to figure out how to slow down everyone from racing off the cliff in anticipation of us figuring out how to do this safely. And so that's the broad framework, I think, in terms of.
Now, there have been a number of pieces of legislation that have been introduced in the U.S. The state of California recently passed legislation. I referenced in the previous hour legislation that it was introduced by Senators Hawley and Blumenthal, the GUARD Act in the U.S. Senate. Do you have any thoughts on some of the measures that are being undertaken by certain states or some of the legislation in Congress, or is that something that we should be looking to?
It's a good start. It needs to go much farther. The example I like is that California's SB 53. It's a transparency bill. I believe the fine is something like $1 million fine if you run afoul of it. OpenAI, if you believe reporting, is something like an $800 billion company. It's just really not significant. That said, I'm glad it has happened.
Thank you, Mr.
if I may
Cooper.
add-
Ms. Church, 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Eidler, I actually wanted to pick up on exactly the point about transparency, because I know in some of your work that you have looked at transparency reporting that's happened in earlier stages of the internet. And what kind of what guidance would you have for us in terms of the type of transparency that we should be expecting from companies around this in an effort to mitigate the type of online harms that we're seeing that we're talking about today?
Broadly, what I would think about is what risks did the AI companies consider? How did they test for these? What results did they find? And how do we know that this is all truthful and credible? Right now, the AI companies essentially get to grade their own homework. It really isn't surprising that you get grade inflation. They say 100% of the time we handle this, but then in the real world, that's not what you see. And so the question is, how do we provide trust, both at a national level, but also internationally, so that countries don't need to worry about rivals undercutting them? You know, they save time by not doing the safety testing because they're trying to race to get ahead. And ultimately, everyone pays the price for this.
Is there anybody that's doing this well already? Any companies that are doing this as part of self-reporting that we should be looking at, who might be leading the way? Maybe it's not perfect yet, but maybe there's something that we can look at in terms of just as we, I guess, move forward down this path.
Yeah, companies have different bright spots. There's no one where I'm totally satisfied.
Fair.
There's an organization called AI Lab Watch that rates companies on their efforts. I think the highest score they give maybe like a 35% out of 100 is the top marks. Some of them are maybe down at the 3% range. And, you know, these numbers are sensitive, right? But that's how people working on safety view this. There's a long, long way to go.
And I very much take your point about self-reporting and some of the challenges that are inherent in that. What do you see as the type of transparency that you would expect from a company that they could self-report on versus the type of activities or safety checks that might belong or be better placed with a regulator?
You know, I would be happy with a start of the companies needing to demonstrate this work to a regulator rather than the public. If that's the crux of it, great. But by and large, this is not yet happening. We will see the beginnings of it with the EU's Code of Practice when it goes into effect this upcoming summer, if that goes as planned. But as of now, there's just not really a quality bar at all, let alone who you share your details with.
Mr. Chair, can I maybe open up that line of questioning to the other two witnesses as well, if you've got anything to add in terms of this issue around transparency and how do we promote it, how do we regulate it, where are companies currently falling down in transparency measures?
Mr. Brisson? Mr. Miale?
Mr. Brisson?
Yeah, so absolutely, just adding to what Mr. Adler was saying, I think what's crucial is to move from a current regime where companies move first and then governments have to scramble behind them. And this always puts governments in the back foot and puts the public on the back foot, to a regime, especially for the most powerful AI systems, that is much closer to how we deal with any other high stakes engineering project. We don't just let people build a bridge and then figure out a few years later, oh, well, it's collapsing because we didn't check the plans. Or like we don't let everybody build a nuclear power plant without first checking what exactly they're planning to build. And I think this approach should be taken more and more with the most powerful AI systems, especially as these companies themselves expect these systems to be extremely dangerous, and they are quite candid about it publicly. And so we should apply the same standard and like flip the burden of proof. They should show, first of all, that their plans are sensible, and then they can go ahead. Not go ahead first and then let governments, scramble behind them.
I think it's important that AI creators themselves say that they do not understand what's happening. But when you talk to companies, they are always very confident. They always say that they know what they're doing. They say there are guardrails and they have found solutions. I think it's important that companies themselves tell us what they still do not understand.
Thank you, Ms. Church. Monsieur Thériault, 5 minutes.
Mr. Thériault, 5 minutes. I'd like to start with this experiment. In your brief, you talked about Anthropic. Back in fall 2025, they announced that there was a cyber attack that was largely carried out without humans, and it was a wide-scale attack. And you said that AI was used to hack other computers, and the successful breaches hit large tech companies as well as government agencies. So it's not just theoretical anymore. What are the lessons that we can pull from that?
Yeah, so absolutely. This is a an unfortunate but not surprising event. And this is one of the many canaries in the coal mine of where AI companies are going by developing superintelligence. This is because what companies are doing, the main path they're taking to get to superintelligence is to develop AI systems that get better and better at especially automating software development and especially automating AI development. They want to initiate what some of these companies call an intelligence explosion, where these AIs just kind of do their own homework and keep creating the next generation of AI with fewer and fewer humans in the loop. And naturally, ultimately, hacking is done by malware is just software used for malicious uses. So as these AI systems are being developed to get better and better specifically at replacing and automating software engineers, they are also getting better at hacking and at cyber attacks. But ultimately, as companies keep investing in this specific angle, which is to make AIs better and better at developing software, we will see more and more of the cyber attacks, but the scale will increase unless we prevent the development of superintelligence.
On en a parlé un petit peu tantôt.
So I want to piggyback on something we have already talked about. When it comes to verifications, in your brief, you said that compliance can be done by international inspection agencies. And you said that the supply chain concentrated for advanced AI chips means an extra layer of control. And you also say that pushing the boundaries of AI requires supercomputers that consumes as much power as an entire city for many months. Can you tell us how these audit mechanisms work in reality?
Absolutely. So one thing that is important to understand is that these powerful AI systems that are being developed are not just a few lines of code on a private computer of a private person. They require a lot of hardware. They require a lot of physical infrastructure that is, visible from satellites. It's data centers that sometimes take the space of a football field. In some case, some space of a small town, and they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're filled with tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of the world's most powerful supercomputers, which are only manufactured by a very few companies, in some cases just by one company in some parts of the supply chain. So this makes enforcement both domestically as well as verification internationally much easier than if we had to deal with just software on a laptop. It's much closer to how we can track plutonium and uranium in the case of nuclear weapons, and that's how we stopped proliferation. And so countries just chiefly need to focus on these large infrastructure projects, and these give the countries large leverage to intervene. For example, countries, if there is a ban on superintelligence, countries can simply require the data center companies to disclose whether companies training on their data center are doing this criminal activity and interrupt them. And even in cases of non-compliance, including internationally, countries can directly ask the data center to be shut down in case, for example, a company or a rogue actor is still undertaking development of superintelligence even outside of the law. So makes it easier to enforce.
Monsieur Adler.
Mr. Adler, would you like to add something? You said that when it comes to governing compute powers, it might be a pathway for the global community. Would you like to add something about that?
I think the thing to emphasize is it is very hard for people to create one of these systems. Like Mr. Miyati emphasized, enormous resources go into it. That is a pathway for being able to tell who is really at the frontier of AI, making these most powerful, uncertain systems about what they will be able to accomplish and to be able to then regulate accordingly.
Okay. Merci, M. Thériault. Mr. Hardy, pour 5 minutes, si vous voulez commencer.
Mr. Hardy, 5 minutes. Thank you for being here today. For the past few meetings at committee, we have been hearing shocking things, and things are moving very quickly. We have heard that the evolution of AI is out of control, that even its creators are telling us that it's hiding its mistakes, it's also using a lot of power and water. So there's the generative side and the specialized side. We are saying that one is more dangerous than the other. When you talk to your colleagues around the world, and you included Mr. Brisson, I imagine that you also talk to other people. Is everyone around the world in agreement on the risks? Do everyone see the same things, or are there different visions on AI? All experts agree on the risks, especially the big risks. For example, generative AI and superintelligence. I think that everyone, except for the companies, no one thinks it's a good idea. But in the USA, there are a lot of bills being drafted. On the other hand, they want to win the race, especially with the current administration. So yes, there are dangers, but for others, the danger is mitigated compared to the prize at the end of the race. So when you talk about the race, people say that once the superintelligence is created, it belongs to no one. So why is every country so motivated to run towards its doom? Because every company has a final motivation. If you are creating a product that you have no control over, then why are you spending billions of dollars on it when you will lose it? Why are they motivated to do so? I cannot speak on their behalf, but I think that they believe that they can control it. If not, they wouldn't release it. They are probably still hopeful. Maybe they have this idea, maybe a little bit of a crazy idea, that they can be the only people that AI will listen to. They will be the only humans who can control AI. Mr. Adler and Mr. Miyati, do you see the same motivations driving these companies? Why are they trying to create something that they cannot control?
There are different plans for how people might control a system like this, but nobody thinks that they work. They are all flimsy and speculative today. One is to put AI in charge of making sure that another AI is good, as it is building more and more complicated AI systems. You hope it doesn't topple down on you, this structure. If I had to speak to the psychology of people inside the companies, they feel somewhat forced. They are racing and they are doing it regretfully because they think they have no choice. They say they have no choice. I think this is mistaken. And in fact, within the last week, DeepMind and Anthropic, two of the leading labs, have said if other companies and groups would slow down as well to go more cautiously, they are open to this. But the issue is they are not governments. They are not international bodies. They can only control their own decisions. And so unilaterally, they feel compelled to go ahead. Somebody else is going to do this. We may as well do it too and try to do it a little bit better, a little bit safer. Ultimately, what we would do is not do this at all until we're really, really sure that we're ready.
Okay.
And
allez-y, Monsieur Miyati.
Merci. Yes, and as Mr. Adler was saying, ultimately, I believe this is where the role of governments comes in, because these companies have shown that they are unwilling or unable to stop. And at the same time, they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the USA, but also increasingly in other countries, to lobby against any form of regulation of AI whatsoever. They are running political campaigns against any candidate that is running for election and criticizing AI and trying to avoid regulation wherever they can. And again, this is why we have governments. We would not have expected big tobacco to stop selling cigarettes just because they cause cancer. They were aware of it. They kept doing it. We had to have regulation. We wouldn't expect big oil to just stop emitting without regulation. And here, it's the place for governments to step in. We can clearly see that the companies cannot self-regulate, and I think governments should draw a clear red line in the sand to
Merci.
say superintelligence is not fine. Thank you.
Est-ce que c'est encore...
Thank you. Are we out of time? 2 seconds. Well, thank you then.
Mr. Saini.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
This question is for Mr. Andre Moiti. Your company, Control A1, is involved in developing some legislation, and I understand you have done some work for England and UK government. Can you tell what those legislation were, what effect they had on the society, and have those legislation been passed in UK and USA?
Thank you very much. So, in the United Kingdom, we were invited to present a bill to the Prime Minister's office that would effectively ban the development of superintelligence. This bill, as we can see in the UK, has not yet passed. We are available to help any country pass such a bill, and we're available to advise any country. And this is our main recommendation. And also what we've done, and we've started doing in other countries like Canada as well as the USA and Germany, is to just brief lawmakers like you to, and we believe this is the biggest current challenge, but also the biggest opportunity. I think most lawmakers are being kept in the dark about how big these risks are. Companies are spending millions of dollars to lobby, so nobody talks about these risks. And both the public and lawmakers, even though experts have been warning about this for years, they're just being kept in the dark. And I think it's very important for lawmakers like you to learn where AI is going, and also, if you find it concerning, to speak up, because you speaking can make an enormous difference. It helps your colleagues look into the problem more, and if enough lawmakers start discussing this problem and start a genuine national conversation, we can get the ball rolling on getting genuine rules in place on this technology.
Said the UK government did not act on it. It's just sitting there. What is happening in USA? That's another country where you have worked with the government to pass those legislations.
In the USA, we're also briefing lawmakers about this problem, and there are some bills that are being discussed in the US. But again, right now, frankly, what we encounter is not that the majority of lawmakers are aware of the problems but are unwilling to act. Is that most of them, the first time we meet them, is the first time they hear about exactly what's going on in AI. And they're very grateful, but nobody is telling them what's going on. Nobody is talking about what's going on. And this piece is the key one, just providing information to lawmakers to help them act in the interest of their citizens. And I genuinely believe once enough lawmakers like you know about the problem, that change can and will happen.
Thank you. And my next question is for you, Mr. Brezen. Your company seeks to ensure responsible use of AI, particularly that it does not knowingly cause emotional distress, especially among vulnerable individuals. How should Canada hold companies responsible for more emotional manipulation through the use of AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first part is the litigation system you see in the US right now. I think there's dozens of cases or so that are being presented. And also the other part of just regulation around emotional harm is research. Right now, the research we have is based on hypothesis or on not real data, but we have the data right now, and we need the funding for those research. So for ourselves, we are working with Princeton and Stanford and other universities to conduct those research, but there's none that have been researched so far. So we need to understand first what is happening on the brain and what is happening on a societal level for these people. And after we can put litigation into place and have injunction maybe to have a solution.
One of the problems that I see with most of these companies are not Canadian companies. So how would our government can control, how can Canadian government control those things?
I think even if it's not based in Canada, we have the population and we have the litigation system that we can still go and file for people that we have here in the US. And that is a way maybe for people to get a voice. And the solution might not be in Canada for the emotional arm, but it comes from the US first. And this company, you mentioned Big Tobacco earlier, it's kind of the same. The only way they respond was not when the report were there, but it was when it started hurting their pocket. I think these companies are kind of on the similar path.
Okay, that's the end of your time, Mr. Sayani, but I do want to give Mr. Adler and Mr. Miotti a chance to answer your last question, because I thought it was a good one. I saw their heads nodding, so before we go to Mr. Thériault pour 10 minutes 30 secondes, Mr. Adler, quick response to Mr. Sayani's question. Mr. Miotti, if you could follow, please.
Canada can be a leader on diplomacy. We need a country to come forward and say, we recognize the world is not ready. We need real joint scientific efforts around clarifying this and what it would take to be ready. And Canada can absolutely be the leader on this issue.
Mr. Miotti?
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. Canada can lead the way. Yes, many of its companies are not on Canadian soil, but Canada has a duty to protect its citizens, so it can still prohibit the development of superintelligence on Canadian soil as it endangers national security and all of its citizens. And Canada can start working together with other like-minded countries, including other middle powers. And even just making the first move can get this ball rolling. We have seen this with many other issues in the past. One country moving first can lead to many others following and lead to genuine global change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miotti. I understand that there are no more questions between the Liberals and the Conservatives, but Mr. Thériault, pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, poser des questions finales.
Mr. Thériault, 2.5 minutes, your final questions. So I want us to be able to properly conclude this meeting and to piggyback on your statements. I think that globally we should do something to stop the race for super intelligent AI. So here's a challenge for you in the next 2 minutes or so. You have this mandate. What do you do concretely? Mr. Miotti, let's start with you.
That's a great question. Well, if you are a lawmaker, I believe the biggest thing you can do right now is to speak out about the risks. Again, the more lawmakers speak out about the risks, the more many of your colleagues will look into them, learn about them, and now coalitions can start forming. If you have influence or a relevant position in the government, or you can recommend what the government should do, I believe the government could start discussing with other international partners the first steps of how do we start getting an international agreement in place that bans superintelligence. And domestically, I believe Canada can immediately already move to introduce legislation to ban superintelligence on its soil. I think this would be the biggest starting point for all of the other actions. But kind of in summary, speaking about the problem is the first step. The more people speak, the more we can actually make progress. Banning it on Canadian soil first, set the example and protect Canadian citizens at home, and internationally speak with like-minded partners and start the process for an international agreement. Thank you.
Mr. Adler, in a minute or less.
I agree. We need to make this a goal state. And if the countries come together and we have an international summit on how to safely ban superintelligence and we fail at the diplomacy, that would be unfortunate, but at least we tried. Right now, it feels like this isn't even recognized as a goal, that we are on a collision course for a potentially awful outcome. And we all need to come together and figure out, are there resourceful, creative ways that we can solve this? If we don't even try, what are we doing here?
Vraiment s'éduquer aussi par rapport au problème.
Also, educate on the problem. People who have read the conversation understand the level of manipulation. I'm more interested in the psychological set, but I think the reading the conversations will open people's eyes and people understand how dangerous it is. Thank you very much.
Say thank you on behalf of the committee to our witnesses, Mr. Miyagi. You know how many times I wanted to say Mr. Miyagi. I'm sure you've heard that many, many times. Mr. Adler, thank you. Monsieur Brisson, merci pour voyager aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Mr. Brisson, for having come here in very dangerous conditions. I really appreciated your appearance.
I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. Number one, we are planning on studying the Lobbying Act probably by the end of February. I think we planned, Madam Clerk, in our meetings last week. We need concurrence from the House in order to study and have a legislative review of the Lobbying Act. So I want you to talk to your House leaders about that. I was going to propose that we move a motion today, but I understand, Madame Lapointe, that you want to talk to your House leader. That's fine. I'd like to deal with that next week if we can. There will be no meeting on Thursday because of the shortened day. And lastly, I think I speak on behalf of the committee. We found out during the meeting that our former colleague, Kirsty Duncan, has passed away at the age of 59. So on behalf of the committee, I want to express our condolences to her family. Little known fact, Kirsty and I went to high school together with Karen Ludwig as well. We actually have a picture from 2016 in the House of Commons of all three of us. So. Yeah, Karen, yeah, she was known as Pit Blatto at the time, and anyways, we took a great picture. Karen actually emailed me during the meeting asking for that picture, so on behalf of the committee, I want to express our condolences to her family as well, and I'm sure you all feel that way. So, the meeting's adjourned.